Hey, it's Sam on What Yacht to Do, and welcome to the Captain's Corner, where I'm going to tell you today about the Welland Canal transit that we had just a few days ago. And so, having been through 250 locks, we thought, hey, you know what? This required to get a third crew member. It's going to be easy. Well, baby, you ain't seen nothing yet, in the words of BTO, Bachman Turner Overdrive. So what I'm going to do is talk about the planning that goes into some of the things that you have to do, the preparation, positioning of the boat, and then our progress through the Welland Canal. So let's get started. All right, so far as planning goes, you're going to be on the St. Lawrence Seaway, so you've got to get glued into the St. Lawrence Seaway. You've got to create an account on there. So go to the Great Lakes, just put in Great Lakes, St. Lawrence Seaway, and create an account, because you're going to have to pay 200 Canadian to get through the Welland Canal. The next thing is that you're going to have to schedule it. So put a date out there. You can always change it, and they are always morning transits. Now, we had been on the Seaway before, and so I have read this thing, the Pleasure Craft Guide. It's 29 pages long, because we had done the Beauharnais locks, 2 of them, coming upbound from Montreal, and then also the Snell and the Eisenhower locks and the Iroquois locks, so I had read ahead. But I downloaded this again and read it again in preparation for the Welland Canal. So you will need that third person by regulation. In the canal, you need 3 people on the boat, 2 to handle the lines and 1 at the helm at least. If you can get more, it's probably a good idea. And some people even actually hire a third person to go downbound. Now, downbound's a lot easier. You only need 2, but as we found out, it's a long day, so you might need an extra help to do that. As you get closer to your trip, you're going to want to position your boat so that you are close to the beginning of the canal. And we're going to go from Port Weller to Port Colborne upbound. Now, it's a southbound trip, and a lot of people get confused about that. They're going upbound because the water flows from Lake Erie into Lake Ontario. Just think about Niagara Falls. You're going to be going up the Niagara escarpment. So we want to get as close as we can to it to make that morning transit, to get there an hour before our lockage is scheduled. So some of the places that you go kind of from eastbound to westbound would be Wilson, New York, Youngstown, New York. Right across the river from that is Niagara-on-the-Lake. Some people go there. Right at Port Weller, there is a marina. If your boat is small enough, you can get into there. We elected to go to Port Dalhousie. And Port Dalhousie is only 5 miles away from the entrance. Actually, the small craft facility is where you're going to start your upbound transit from. So we elected to do that because we knew that the next day the weather was going to be a little choppy. So I'd rather do 3 miles in choppy weather than 26 miles in choppy weather, which you'd have from Wilson. So position your boat, update your arrival time, or not your arrival time, update your date if you have to. You have to do that before 7 o'clock in the morning, according to the Seaway rules. And then get ready. All right, let's talk about preparation the day of. And I had read that Pleasure Craft Guide 2 times. I read it 1 more time the night before, and I made myself a little whiteboard here because I want to have some time with Rev, my first mate, and also when the second mate gets on board, I want to have some time with him to be able to say, hey, this is what we're going to do, right? And that worked out pretty good. So I did my little whiteboard, and I said, hey, if I want to be here at the Pleasure Craft facility at 8 o'clock, I need to leave at 7:15. So starting engine 7:05, and then my route into here, figuring on 8 miles per hour. We actually went a little faster because the wave action was so terrible that, hey, we wanted to get through it. We got here to the rendezvous point, okay, and so what I did was saying, okay, locks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they're all going to be on a starboard tie, the mileage in between them, and these are going to be on port. I put my speeds up here because 6 knots is equal to 7 miles per hour, which is equal to 11 kilometers per hour. So just so I look at it, because there are speed restrictions. There are some different light configurations in the canal, so I put a little shorthand for that, as well as our registration number. Now this worked out great because Rev and I looked at it, and I had it over here by the side, and she goes, how much between the different locks? I could tell her that. And also when I brought that third crew member on board, I showed him this and we talked about it, and he gave me a lot of good information because he's been through the canal probably 25, 30 times as a extra crew member. So it worked out well. So it is the day of, and I'm going to show you with my whiteboard how we went through the 8 locks. And I'll tell you, it is and can be a grueling day. So make sure you eat a good breakfast. Make sure you have some snacks along the way. Make some sandwiches, that's good, because you're gonna have to feed your other crew member that is on board and brief your crew member. So think about that. You're gonna acclimate that crew member to your boat. You're gonna have all that discussion done. Now, the question about whether or not you put the engines, turn the engines on or off, unless you're directed by the lockmaster to do one or the other, use your own judgment. And I will tell you, there were some times I said, okay, I'm gonna shut the engines off. And then during the lockage, as we were raising up and the water's coming in, it was time to start the engines because we need a little bit of fore and aft thrust. I've got side thrusters on the here's to us, a bow and a stern thruster. They helped as well. So let's talk about that, because when the crew member came on, we had another diagram that we used, and this is how we went through the locks. And it's going to be a long day, so just realize, hey, we got through this first lock at 10:15. We left Port Dalhousie at 7:15, so we're already 3 hours into the day before we start. Now lock 1 and 2 is a starboard tie, and the black square shows where the here's to us was, and then we had 2 boats behind us and then 2 boats onto that, so a 2 + 2 raft on there. After we got through that, they switched us over to the other side. It's a port tie and the same configuration, just a different wall. Now the flights of locks, which is 4, 5, and 6, this flight, they are going to move you around to give you the best chance based on the water flow, how the valves come in at those locks. So you will follow the directions of the lockmaster, and usually there's somebody on board, one of the boats that is coordinating. They know, they will pass the information and explain. But the here's to us went in on the 4th position, and then we had somebody raft off of us. We're now at the back of the pack for the flight of 4, 5, and 6 locks. Now they are right close together, and the other thing that we realized is, like, hey, there's ships coming down the other side. There's another set of locks that are coming from there. Another thing that happened during this is we were delayed going into 3, and we were delayed later for 7. There are commercial freighters coming, so they take precedence. Our additional crew member told us how much they paid. They paid $35,000 to get through the Welland Canal. Hey, we paid $200, so guess who gets preference? As we moved out of these locks, and these were a big challenge to get through, we went into lock 7, and again we changed positions. This time we were at the front, we had somebody raft off of us, and then we had 3 boats rafting off behind us. So from there, it's about 15 miles to lock 8, and lock 8, you will drive through lock 8. But again, we didn't get there till 8:15 in the evening, so you can see that's at least 10 hours from the time we started, and it was starting to get dark. So we ended up tying up at the wall, and it was dusk, and it was a long day. And I can tell you that, hey, if I were going to go either downbound on it. In other words, from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario, I might want to have another crew member on board just to give us a break, because it can be a long day. Now, it's not as taxing going downbound from the way that the water flows, but if you're going to have a long day, maybe think about a third crew member. That was our experience on the Welland Canal, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Look for the full video coming out on what yacht to do sometime in the not too distant future, or when it gets out, we'll let you know.